The forest was too quiet. That's what Eli noticed first. The wind didn't move, the trees didn't speak, and no animals made a sound. Only his boots crunched softly on dead leaves as he walked deeper into the strange woods. His ship had crash-landed 3 days ago, and the forest moon was supposed to be abandoned. But now it felt like something or someone was watching. Eli held his breath and paused. His hand rested near the metal rod he used as a weapon. He scanned the trees, tall and dark, reaching into a sky covered by clouds. No movement, no sound. Still, something didn't feel right. Then he heard it, a soft shuffle in the leaves. It was too quiet to be a beast, too slow to be wind. He turned quickly, eyes searching the shadows, and that's when he saw her. She stood halfway behind a thick tree, small and shaking. Her skin shimmered silver in the low light, and her armor was scratched and torn. A long cut bled from her arm, and her hands clutched a sharp, curved blade. She was no older than a teenager by human standards. Maybe younger. Her eyes, glowing faintly blue, stared straight at Eli. Not with hate, but with fear. He didn't move. She looked like she might fall over if the wind touched her. She opened her mouth to speak, but her voice came out as a whisper. "Don't." "Come closer," she said, weak and broken. Eli raised both hands to show he had no weapon drawn. "I won't hurt you," he said softly. "I'm not one of them." She didn't answer. Her knees trembled. Then, without warning, she dropped her blade and fell to the ground. Eli rushed forward, not thinking, just reacting. She was burning with fever, her hands ice cold. She looked up at him with a strange expression, as if she couldn't believe a human was helping her. "Why? Would you help?" she whispered, before her voice faded into silence. Eli carried her to a small cave he had found earlier, one with dry leaves and a fire pit he had made. He wrapped her in his emergency blanket and lit the fire again. He gave her a bit of water and crushed medical paste over her bleeding arm. She flinched at first, but didn't push him away. When she finally opened her eyes again, the flames danced across her face. She stared at him for a long time, then spoke. "You're human," she said, her voice soft but clear. Eli nodded. "Yeah, and you're not." She smiled weakly at that, a short, sad smile. "My name is Kyrene," she said. "I am a huntress." From the clan of Razin. Eli had never heard of it. But he didn't interrupt. "I came to this moon to escape," she continued, her voice shaking. "They attacked us, the black ships. They took my sisters, my brothers. I ran," her hands clenched into fists. "I am small, but I fought. I bled and I ran." Eli watched her. She was so different Italian, but something in her eyes was the same as any human child in pain. He nodded slowly. "You're safe now," he said. Kyrene shook her head. "No," she said. "They will come again. They always come." Then she looked at him deeply. "You are strong," she said, almost like a question. Eli gave a tired smile. "I'm not sure about that." Kyrene leaned closer, her small fingers grabbing his wrist. "You are human," she said. "That means you have strength." "The kind I was told about." Eli blinked, confused. "What kind?" Kyrene closed her eyes. "Not just body strength. Soul strength, the kind that doesn't leave others behind." The fire crackled, and Eli didn't know what to say. He had been alone for so long, helping her felt right, even if it made no sense. She whispered again, so softly that he almost didn't hear it. "I beg you, give me your strength." Just enough to stand. Eli sat in silence. Then he nodded. "All right," he said. "I'll help you." And in that moment, something changed between them. She wasn't just a strange alien girl anymore. She was someone who trusted him when she had no reason to, and Eli, without fully understanding why, had said yes. The huntress had begged for his human strength, and he had given it, not with power, not with weapons, but with kindness. Outside, the forest was still silent, but inside the cave, something new had begun. A bond, a promise, and the first spark of something that would shake worlds. The fire kept them warm through the night. But Eli didn't sleep much. He kept waking up, checking to make sure the alien girl Kareen was still breathing. She looked small in the blanket, curled up like a lost child. And even though her armor and blade said warrior, her soft breaths told a different story. She was just a girl trying to survive. When morning came, Kareen opened her eyes slowly. She looked at the fire, then at Eli, and spoke in a quiet voice. "You stayed," she said, surprised. Eli nodded. "You needed help." Kareen looked away, as if unsure what to say next. After a long pause, she whispered, "Where I come from." "People don't stay." Eli handed her some dry food, old rations from his pack. She took it with both hands, eating like she hadn't tasted food in days. He waited until she was done before speaking again. "What happened to your tribe?" he asked gently. Kareen didn't answer at first. Her face went still, her eyes dark with memory. "They called themselves the Shadow Claws," she said at last. "Black armor, red lights, no faces. They came without warning." Eli listened quietly. "They took the strong ones first." She continued, "My sister, my leader, even the children who could run fast." Her voice trembled, but she kept speaking. "I escaped because I was small, and I knew how to hide." Eli frowned. "That's not weakness," he said. "That's survival." Kareen looked at him, unsure. "Where I come from, if you hide, you are a coward. Then your people don't understand what real strength is." Eli replied. Kareen sat up slowly, her eyes locked on him. "You fight with your heart," she said, as if studying him. "You're kind. Humans, you were spoken of in whispers among my people." Eli raised an eyebrow. "Really? I thought most aliens saw us as weak." Kareen nodded. "Yes, many do," she said. "But some believed humans had something rare." She touched her chest lightly. Over her heart, not strength of arms, not speed, not claws, but something here. She looked at him again. The strength to protect even strangers. Eli felt a strange emotion rise in him, something between sadness and pride. He never saw himself as special, just a man trying to survive. But Kareen looked at him like he was more than that. She reached into a small pouch at her side and pulled out a thin strip of black cloth. It was marked with a white symbol on old war sign. "My sister gave this to me before she was taken," she said. "She told me to find strength, and I ran like a coward." Eli gently took the cloth from her hands, turning it between his fingers. "You didn't run from the fight," he said. "You ran toward your chance to fight another day." Kareen blinked, like she had never heard anyone say that before. "You speak like no one I've known," she said softly. Eli smiled. "I'm just a mechanic who got stuck on a forest moon," he said. Kareen shook her head. "No. You are human." A strange silence filled the air, one that felt more like understanding than distance. Then she asked something that surprised him. "Will you teach me?" Eli looked up. "Teach you what?" "Your kind of strength," she said. "The kind that doesn't use blades. The kind that helped me even when you had nothing to gain." Eli scratched the back of his neck. "Unsure. I'm not a soldier, Kareen," he said. "I don't have a special code or training." She smiled for the first time. "I don't need a code," she said. "I just need to know how to be like you." Eli looked at her, this tiny huntress who once begged for strength and now sat ready to learn. He saw fire in her eyes, but it wasn't the fire of rage. It was the fire of someone who had seen pain and still wanted to rise. "All right," Eli said at last. We'll start small. With what I know, Kyrene nodded. Small is enough, she said. I will grow. Eli stood and stepped outside the cave, motioning for her to follow. The sky above was clear, and the forest was awake, now birds calling. Leaves moving with the wind, he picked up a long stick and tossed it to her. Let's see what the huntress can do, he said, smiling. Kyrene caught it and spun it in her hands like it was a real weapon. I may be small, she said with a grin, but I learn fast, and so the training began. Not with drills or machines, but with fire, trust, and two souls from different stars, one who had given strength, and one who had learned to carry it. The sun was low, casting long orange shadows through the forest. Eli stood with a stick in his hands, showing Kyrene how to hold it steady. She copied him, her hands still shaky, but her eyes focused. Balance first, Eli said. Then movement. Kyrene nodded, lips pressed tight. She wanted to learn, not just to survive, but to become something stronger than fear. She had watched Eli closely since the moment he helped her, the way he built fires, checked the wind, and always looked for signs of danger. He wasn't a soldier, but there was something sharp in his quiet. He moved like someone who had learned the hard way to stay alive. Kyrene respected that. Every day, she practiced. She swung sticks, balanced on rocks, and studied how Eli moved, and every night they sat by the fire, sharing stories. Eli told her about earth-about cities that touched the sky and oceans that sang. Kyrene listened, eyes wide. My people have never seen water that stretches beyond the horizon, she whispered. You will, Eli promised. She smiled, though her eyes still held sadness. One evening, as the fire cracked low, Kyrene turned to Eli. Do you miss your people? She asked. Eli nodded. Yeah, he said. I had a sister back home. She always worried about me. Kyrene looked into the fire. I had a brother, she said. He was silent like the stars, but strong like the mountains. She closed her eyes. I still hear his voice sometimes. Eli didn't speak, but he placed a hand on her shoulder. It was the first time they touched without injury or fear. It was quiet, warm, a moment that said, you are not alone. Days passed, and Kyrene grew faster. Sharper, stronger. She learned to hear danger before it came. She could strike with a wooden stick like it was a blade. But more than that, she began to understand what Eli had meant when he said strength wasn't just about the body. She stopped blaming herself for running. She started standing taller, walking without fear. One night while training, Eli called for a break. Kyrene dropped to the ground, breathing heavy but smiling. You're not bad. Eli teased. Kyrene smirked. I'll beat you tomorrow. He laughed. But just as their laughter faded, the forest fell quiet. Too quiet. Eli stood up fast. Kyrene froze, her senses alert. Something was wrong. No wind, no birds, no bugs. Just stillness, thick and cold. Then, in the distance, a soft click. A sound like metal brushing against stone. Eli motioned for silence, and Kyrene crawled beside him. They crept to the edge of the trees, staying low, and that's when they saw it. A dark figure moved between the trees, tall, armored, glowing red eyes behind a black helmet. Then another, then three more slavers. Kyrene's breath caught in her throat. They found me, she whispered. Eli looked at her. We need to leave now. Kyrene didn't move. No, she said, her voice low. I won't run again. Eli looked at her in shock. What do you mean? They'll kill you. Kyrene's hands clenched into fists. They already took everything, she said. I won't let them take you too. Eli stepped in front of her. I'm not letting you fight them alone, he said. Kyrene's voice broke. You gave me your strength. Now let me return it. Eli shook his head. This isn't about strength anymore, he said. It's about standing together. They backed into the cave, breathing fast but staying calm. Eli lit the fire low, then grabbed his strongest metal rod. Kyrene picked up 2 sharpened sticks and tied her brother's war cloth around her wrist. Her hands didn't shake anymore. Her eyes didn't look scared. She had become something different. Not just a huntress, a protector. Eli watched her move. She wasn't the same girl who had begged for help. She had changed, and he had too. Together, they were stronger. And whatever came through those trees tonight would see that the fire burned low, the moon rose high, and 2 souls, 1 human. One alien waited in the dark, not with fear, but with fire. Kyrene stood barefoot in the mud, her arms stretched out. Her eyes closed. She listened not with her ears, but with her whole body. The wind brushed her skin. The leaves rustled above, and far away she could feel the pulse of life, a bird landing, a small animal darting, a branch creaking under weight. All of it became part of her. And Eli watched her from behind a fallen tree, a quiet smile on his face. She had changed so much. When they first met, she could barely stand. Now, her stance was strong, her focus sharp. He didn't have real weapons or high-tech training gear. But what he did have was patience, and Kyrene soaked it up like dry earth, taking water. "Now open your eyes," Eli said. Kyrene did. He tossed a stone her way fast. With little warning, she twisted, caught it midair, and smiled. "You're getting cocky," Eli said. Laughing, Kyrene grinned. Maybe just a little. They trained from sunrise to sunset. Simple tools became their weapons. Sticks, stones, ropes from broken gear. They built dummies from wood and old cloth. They practiced balance by walking on narrow logs over shallow water. Every fall was a lesson, every bruise a reminder, and through it all, Kyrene never gave up. But it wasn't just the physical training. Eli taught her how to stay calm, how to read the sky, judge silence, and trust her instincts. He showed her how to protect others without becoming a monster. "You don't have to fight like them," he said one evening. "You just have to be stronger than fear." That line stayed with Kyrene. It echoed in her mind every time she looked at her reflection in the stream. She no longer saw a weak girl running from the past. She saw someone becoming more. They built small traps together, clever ones, not deadly, just enough to slow down attackers. They made smoke bombs using herbs and sap. Kyrene learned how to climb trees faster, how to leap from branch to branch like the native beasts. Eli couldn't always keep up, but he didn't mind. "Guess I'll be the slow one in this duo," he joked once. Kyrene replied with a smirk. "Not slow, just heavy." They both laughed. And it echoed through the forest like something rare joy. One night, after a long day of training, they sat near the fire again. The stars above were bright, untouched by city lights. Kyrene lay on her back, arms behind her head. "Why do you keep helping me?" she asked softly. Eli looked up at the sky, thinking, "I don't know," he said after a while. "Maybe because someone helped me once when I didn't deserve it." Kyrene turned to him, curious. "Who?" Eli smiled, but it was sad. "My sister," he said. "She always believed I could be more, even when I didn't." Kyrene nodded. "She sounds like a warrior." "She was," he whispered. "She died during the early expansion wars." Kyrene didn't say anything for a while. Then she sat up and placed a hand over her chest. "I will fight like your sister did," she said. "I will carry your strength forward." Eli looked at her, surprised by her words. She was serious, dead serious. The next morning, Kyrene made a symbol in the dirt, a mix of her clan's mark and the earth symbol Eli once drew for her. She pointed to it. "This is our bond," she said. Eli nodded. "Not teacher and student," he said. "No," she agreed. Partners. Just as she said that, they both froze. A sound cut through the trees, fast, mechanical. Then another. Eli stood quickly, eyes searching the woods. Kyrene was already moving, grabbing her training gear, checking traps. They're getting closer. She whispered. Eli nodded, and we're running out of time. But something was different now. They didn't panic. They didn't hide. It moved like a team, silent, quick, with a plan. The fire inside Kyrene wasn't fear anymore. It was readiness. Eli watched her as she tightened the ropes on a snare trap. He remembered the moment she fell into his arms, broken and scared. And now she stood like someone ready to defend a world. Let them come, Kyrene said, her eyes glowing with a fierce light. I won't beg anymore. Eli nodded. No, but you'll still win, he said, with fire in your hands and strength. In your heart, the forest around them grew darker. But inside that cave, the fire between them burned brighter than ever. Night came fast. The forest turned cold and silent again. Eli sat near the fire, sharpening the end of a broken spear with a stone. Kyrene stood near the cave entrance, watching the shadows move between the trees. She didn't blink, didn't flinch. She had felt it hours ago. Something old, something terrible was coming back. She turned to Eli and said softly, They're close. He nodded. How many? Kyrene closed her eyes, listening to the silence. More than 5. Maybe 10, she said. They walk slow, like they know we're waiting. Eli stood up and placed the spear down carefully. We stick to the plan, he said. Kyrene nodded once, her face calm. They had spent the last few days preparing traps, escape tunnels, and defense points. But even with all that, Eli knew the slavers were dangerous. Kyrene's hands trembled just for a second. She clenched them tight, whispering something in her own language. Eli noticed. You all right? She looked up. I'm ready, she said. But I'm also scared. Eli stepped closer, his voice steady. Good, he said. Fear reminds you you're alive, but it doesn't control you. Kyrene breathed deep. Yes, she said. Fear used to chase me, but now I chase it back. Then it began. A sharp, metallic sound echoed through the trees, boots stomping, heavy breathing. The hum of energy rifles. Red lights appeared between the trunks, small, glowing dots floating in the dark. Kyrene pulled Eli back behind the cave wall. There. Spreading out, she whispered, like they've done this many times. One of the traps snapped shut. A loud scream followed, then silence. Another trap went off, an explosion of smoke and ash. A third attacker fell, coughing hard, but it wasn't enough. The rest of them kept coming. Kyrene took a deep breath and raised her spear. Now, she whispered. Eli nodded, and they both rushed out together. Eli swung first, slamming his metal rod into the side of a slaver's helmet. The creature dropped fast. Kyrene darted past him like a shadow, sliding under another attacker's arms and slashing upward. They fought like fire and wind, lie strong and grounded. Kyrene fast and sharp. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Every movement was timed, every step part of a rhythm. They had built over days of trust, but the slavers were many and they were brutal. Eli took a hit to his shoulder and stumbled. Kyrene screamed his name and threw herself into the enemy. Driving her spear deep, blood splashed across her arm. But she didn't stop. She pulled Eli up and dragged him back toward the trees. We can't win if we stay in one place, she said. Then let's move, Eli said, teeth gritted from pain. They ran through the forest, leading the slavers into more traps, pits, hidden under leaves, tripwires made from vines. Smoke bursts that blinded and slowed them down. But the enemy didn't stop. They wanted Kyrene dead or alive. She ducked behind a large rock and pulled Eli down with her. He was bleeding, his face pale. Kyrene looked at him, her heart heavy with guilt. This is my fault, she said. Eli shook his head. No, he said. You gave me purpose, Kyrene. This fight is mine too. Tears burned in her eyes, but she blinked them away. She stood tall, her hands steady. Then she saw something. A ridge above them, high ground, if they could get there. They could set off the last trap, the biggest one. It was a large tree, balanced by rope and stone, ready to fall and block the whole path. Come, she said, helping Eli to his feet. He leaned on her as they moved. Step by step, the slavers saw them and shouted, chasing fast, but Kyrene didn't slow down. She reached the ridge and cut the final rope. The massive tree came crashing down. The forest shook as it slammed into the ground. Dirt flew into the air, and several slavers were crushed beneath the weight. The path behind them was blocked. Now they were safe. Eli collapsed to the ground, breathing hard. Kyrene dropped beside him. They looked at each other, both exhausted, dirty, and alive. Then Kyrene whispered, "You told me once that strength is not in the body." Eli nodded slowly. Yes. She placed her hand over her heart. Then today, I fought with human strength. Eli smiled weakly. You did. Kyrene leaned back, her eyes looking up at the stars. She didn't feel small anymore. She didn't feel like a runaway. She had faced her past, and now? She was something new. The forest was quiet again. Smoke still drifted in the air. And the broken tree lay across the dirt path like a wall between past and present. Eli sat under the ridge, his arm wrapped in cloth, stained red but not bleeding. Anymore, Kyrene stood a few feet away, facing the wind, her spear stuck into the ground beside her. She didn't speak, she didn't need to. The silence said it all. She had changed, not just in how she moved, but in how she stood. Her back was straighter, her breath steady, her gaze calm. The girl who once shook from fear now watched the stars like they were maps to her future. She wasn't running anymore. She was becoming someone new. Eli watched her quietly, his eyes tired but proud. "You don't look like the same girl who fell into my arms," he said. Kyrene turned slowly and gave a small smile. "I'm not," she said. "You helped me become someone stronger." He chuckled. "I just taught you how to swing a stick." She shook her head. "No," she said, stepping closer. "You taught me how to choose who I want to be." They sat together as the night stretched on. Far in the distance, no more red lights moved. No more boots stumped the ground. The slavers were gone, or at least the ones brave enough to follow had paid the price. Kyrene looked down at her hands, still stained with dust and blood. "I thought being strong meant never showing weakness," she said softly, "but you showed me that real strength is something else." Eli nodded slowly. "It's not about being fearless," he said. "It's about standing anyway." The next morning, they began moving again. They packed what little they had, some tools, a few healing roots, and the cloth Kyrene had once carried from her sister, but now she tied it to her arm with purpose, not guilt. It was no longer a memory of failure. It was a promise, they found. An old signal tower deep in the forest, covered in vines, half buried in soil. Eli spent 2 days fixing it, rewiring broken panels and replacing burned wires with scraps from his gear. Kyrene stayed by his side, helping him lift, clean, and repair. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about reaching others, helping others. "Once we send the signal," Kyrene said. "What then?" Eli looked at her. "Then we wait, and we hope someone still out there is listening." Kyrene nodded. "And if no one comes?" "Then we keep moving," he said. Together, that night, they lit another fire. Kyrene looked across the flames, her voice soft. "Do you think humans and my kind can really live side by side?" Eli poked the fire, sending sparks upward. "I think we already are," he said. "You and me, we proved it's possible." The next morning, they activated the tower. A blue light blinked at the top, and a small message was sent into the stars. Coordinates, species tags. Survivor code. Friendly, it was a risk if the wrong people saw it. They could return. But Kyrene stood beside Eli with no fear. "We fight together now," she said. Eli smiled. Always days passed. Then a week, they built a small shelter near the tower and helped wild creatures trapped in old ruins. They followed the smoke of broken escape pods and rescued 2 alien children hiding in a hollow tree. Kyrene offered them food and wrapped one in her own cloak. They followed her. Without question, Eli watched it happen and realized she wasn't just strong now, she was becoming a leader. When the children asked her who she was, she answered clearly, "I am Kyrene, daughter of fire and strength, and him." One of them asked, pointing to Eli. Kyrene looked at Eli, and her answer was simple. "He is my partner." They moved from place to place, spreading the message: hope, unity, survival, and slowly stories began to spread. Not just about a crash or a war, but about a tiny huntress who begged for strength, and the human who said yes. Now, people whispered her name with respect. Not fear, not pity, but honor. Kyrene, the warrior who stood beside a human and learned to fight with heart, not just a blade. And Eli, once a lone mechanic, had become something more, her light when the forest grew dark. They were more than just survivors. They were proof that 2 broken souls from 2 different worlds could create something powerful. Together, they had changed. Together, they would change others. Months passed. The forest moon no longer felt cold and forgotten. Fires burned in more places now, not just to survive, but to gather. More survivors had arrived, drawn by the signal. Aliens from lost tribes, humans from crashed outposts, and others who had nowhere left to go. They all came with fear in their eyes, but left with hope in their hearts. Because when they arrived, they found something unexpected. A tiny alien warrior and a human standing side by side. Not leaders, not rulers, but protectors. Kyrene moved through the camp with silent steps, her head held high. She wore simple armor, patched with cloth from many worlds. Her spear was no longer just a weapon. It was a symbol of survival, of change. Children followed her, copying her movements as she trained them to be strong in heart and body. Eli worked nearby, teaching others how to fix, cook safely, and build shelters that could stand through storms. His arms still ached from the battle, but he never complained. He had found something here, something bigger than himself. He had found purpose. He had found family. Sometimes, at night, Kyrene sat beside him by the fire. She didn't speak much during those moments. She simply leaned her head on his shoulder, her eyes watching the stars. She used to dream of escaping, of hiding. Now she dreamed of building, of protecting. One evening, as they sat together under the moonlight, a group of traders arrived, neutral beings who moved between war zones, selling food and tech. They had heard stories, and they had come to see if they were true. Is it real? One of them asked, the story of the huntress and the human. Kyrene stepped forward, her voice calm. "It is," she said, "and we're still here." The traders offered supplies in exchange for protection. Eli and Kyrene didn't ask for power, just peace. They built trade routes, shared medicine, and welcomed those who came with open hands. Slowly, a small village rose from the dust, simple, strong, alive. No flags were raised, no leaders crowned, but everyone knew who made it possible. One night, a young alien girl approached Kyrene as she sharpened her spear. "Were you always strong?" the girl asked. Kyrene smiled softly. "No," she said, "once I was small and afraid, but a human gave me his strength, and I grew." The girl tilted her head. "Can I have strength too?" Kyrene knelt beside her. "You already do," she said, placing a hand over the girl's heart. "You just have to believe it." The village grew in silence and laughter, in training and trust. but not all days were peaceful. Sometimes raiders came, hoping to take what was built, but they never made it far, because by then, the forest was not a quiet place anymore. It had protectors. And the protectors fought not for revenge, but for each other. Eli stood at the edge of the village wall one morning, staring at the rising sun. Kyrene walked up beside him, carrying 2 cups of hot broth. She handed him one without a word. He took it, smiled, and said, "You ever think we'd end up here?" Kyrene shook her head slowly. "No," she said. "But now I can't imagine being anywhere else." Eli turned to her. "You're a legend now," he teased. Kyrene raised an eyebrow. "So are you," he laughed. "I was just trying to fix my ship, and I was just trying not to die," she said, smirking. They both laughed, and for a moment, all the pain, all the war, felt far away. Later that day, a new traveler arrived, a human boy, injured and scared. Eli helped him. Sit gave him water. Kyrene wrapped his leg in herbs and cloth. The boy looked at them both and asked, "Are you the ones from the story?" Eli shrugged. "Depends on the story." The boy smiled. "The one where the warrior begged for help and the human didn't walk away." Kyrene looked at Eli, then turned to the boy. "Yes," she said, "that story is true. And the story didn't end there. It spread across moons and stars of a tiny huntress who became strong, of a human who gave help without expecting anything in return, of a bond that didn't care about race or origin, only courage. They called them many names, fire pair, the bonded blades, forest guardians. But to each other, they were simply Kyrene and Eli, 2 souls who found each other in darkness and chose to stand in the light together.